All right, cool. All right, well, welcome to my presentation. My name is Branden Miller. I go by Fozzie Hacks if you're on Twitter. I tweet a lot. So if you don't want to know what I've had for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and fifth meal, then, just mute me. All right. And this is Hacking for Homeschoolers. For those of you that have heard me present before, I rarely do anything technical because I'm in the technical world like every day, all day, and even after work. So I usually do something that's like borderline. I talk about technology, but I don't do anything groundbreaking. So who am I? I love to wear a onesie, drink hot chocolate, and talk about healthcare with my family. I'm a security consultant. I work from home now, which I really love. It took me a little bit to get used to. How many people do we have working from home? Was that a shocker whenever you went from like a corporate environment to home?
It's the greatest change of my life.
It was, but I struggled with it for like the first 3 months. I was like, there's nobody to talk to. I can't go downstairs.
I struggled with it for like 3 seconds.
Okay. Yeah. Well, my wife actually put a sign on the stairs that said, "School is in session, you're not allowed." So, because she knew I would just go down there and kind of hover. So, obviously I'm a dad. I have 3 kids, 15, 12, and 9. Husband, Christian, and I am the official dean of the Way08 Academy. And I'll explain that story a little bit later. How many people do we have that homeschool? Sweet. How many of you guys are in Kentucky? All right. So you had to set yourself up, right? Did you fill out the paperwork? Yeah.
The rules are really lax.
Yeah, I know. You're not. By the way, you're not on camera, so feel free to answer. I will answer according to what the state says. All right. So, but yes, officially, I'm the dean. I'm the counselor. We actually did like a whole structure because we made fun with it. Even my kids are on staff, so that's kind of how we did it. If you have questions, don't wait till the end. Just raise your hand. Right? There's a lot of material that I myself discovered doing this presentation, putting it together. And it really blew my mind whenever, I thought I knew about the history of education in our country because that's something that I was passionate about. And then whenever my wife found out what I was going to present on, she said, "Okay, by the way, you've had most of it wrong. Here you go. Here's my notes." And so I was like, whoa, really? Okay. And because she has OCD, she cites everything, and it's all in perfect order with tabs and color-coded. It was great. So, once again, what this talk is not is groundbreaking. None of the information I'm putting out here, except for the last part, came from me. It all came from sourced material that I'll have at the end. Some of it I sourced, at the bottom of the slide. The rest of it comes at the end of the presentation. And what this talk is, well, we're going to talk about social studies and history a little bit because that's actually important to understand why our educational system is built the way it is today. It also ties into why my wife and I decided to homeschool. We'll talk about the STEM program and some both facts and myths that are associated with the STEM program. Talk a little bit about psychology. And then a lot about me, because I'm presenting and you're here. So it's all about me. So we'll start off with the first one. This is something that has always intrigued me and I've always kind of laughed about. Never could find good source material, but I found it, so I'm going to share it. So homeschoolers do not score as high as standardized testing, such as the ACT and SAT, as traditional students. Is that true or false? It's actually false, and of course I kind of led you into that. But the actual statistics, and this is from Princeton Review, who is responsible for one of those 2 tests, will tell you that homeschooled students actually score on average 30% higher on standardized testing. I have a theory as to why that is, and I'll tell you a little bit about that later. So, social studies and history. This is where we're going to talk about the early school, the reform era, as it's known as, or the progressive era, as some people call it, and then homeschooling and how that came about. So early school, I went back as far as the 1700s, tried to find as much as I could. 1700s to about mid-1800s, 1830, right around that time frame. Schools were pretty much non-existent. Only about 33% of children in America went to school, right? That was kind of a holdover from our past. It was the same way in the English society. Only the rich people really sent their kids to school, and they would send them away a lot of times, or they had a tutor full time. They were private, usually, very unorganized. In other words, they didn't have a standard curriculum. They had kind of a what they called the classical theory of instruction, which was just a series of courses like Latin and arithmetic, English, and writing, things of that nature. Penmanship was taught in a lot of schools. I think they should bring that back, personally. There was no compulsory education. On average, the school began at age 5 and went to about 15 before you graduated. If you were in the upper class, obviously it would go a little bit longer. They would prepare you for college at that point. Usually it was a one-room schoolhouse. There were no age gradient or age grade systems at that point. And they pretty much followed this Bell-Lancaster method, which was the older pupils who tended to be more apt would actually help teach the younger pupils. That's actually what we do in our homeschooling. So my daughter, who's 15, actually assists in teaching my 9-year-old and my 12-year-old. Does two things. Number one, helps her learn the subject material better and makes her confident in the subject material because she has to teach it. So it better prepares her for whatever she's learning. Early schools, once again, this is about 1800 or 1830s to 1900. We started to have what was known as the man reforms. There was a college professor in the Northeast, I forget what college or university he was at, but he went to Prussia, and he studied their school system because they were supposedly some of the best school systems in the world. They had a largely educated population. The number of people that were literate were better than most other regions in the world at that time, or the known world, I should say. He really pushed for the same content in all schools. So he said, we should have a core curriculum. You'll hear that again later if you haven't already heard that. And it should include the following items. And at that time, it was really the items that a lot of the schools were teaching. So you had your arithmetic, your writing, your Latin, things of that nature. It was the first time they began to focus on teacher education. Before this point, most of the teachers were people that were knowledgeable in a subject, so they taught school. The problem was they had to teach 6 or 7 subjects. So if your specialization or your skill was in math, you were still in that one-room schoolhouse and you had to teach all the other subjects, right? It's kind of like our elementary school students now, but in high school, right? Because you went up to age 15. They introduced age grading, which was considered, each of your subjects would be taught to a certain age level, and they would stay together as they matriculated or went up to a different level. We continue to have that today. And in 1900, this is, kind of freaky. Well, first of all, I had to go figure out what states weren't a part of this. In 1900, only 34 states had compulsory education. So I was like, whoa, that seems really low. And then you got to realize we only had 45 states at that time, right? So Arizona, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Hawaii, and Alaska. So that's 5 states off right there. So basically 10 states didn't have compulsory education. Now that doesn't mean that kids didn't go to school for longer than age 15 or weren't required to go to school. It just meant that there wasn't a law in the books that said you had to go to school until a certain age. Oh, and it was 14. I just said 15. So our modern school system, starting really about 1910, they started introducing this completely different way of teaching students. It's known as the progressive era of school. The purpose of school switched. It went from teaching you these core classes, these classical training is what they called it, to what was known as content knowledge. In other words, we teach you something, you tell us what we taught you. And then learning how to live, so giving you life skills. About 66% of children attended school. You had compulsory education pretty much all over the nation at that time. Each time a new state would join the union, they would introduce or enact law for compulsory education. The problem was only about 50% of kids actually went long enough to receive a diploma. So a lot of states at that time, compulsory education still ended at 14 or 15 years old. And then I cut and pasted this. The purpose of education, or modern education, is to produce the managerial and professional leadership needed for rapid economic modernization. What I did not realize is industry and corporate America had a huge impact on the way that we began to teach our students. And the purpose was give them the skills so that they could go into the workforce and grow their company or the industry that they were a part of. Interestingly enough, at this time, trade school boomed. So they also started doing a lot of the trade system, kind of like they had in England, since the beginning of time. It kind of faltered towards the late 1800s in America. Well, they brought that back because they recognized they needed skilled training or skilled tradesmen to do particular tasks that it took you a long time, to gain that knowledge, skills, and ability. So I just thought that was interesting. You'll see this statement again in our modern schooling. Homeschooling. This is where I got a lot of my facts wrong, and my wife set me straight. So it makes sense once I started reading her sources. To begin with, homeschooling as a movement started in the 60s. Now, if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense. What was happening in the 60s? We had some little fight, right, with another country, right? The Vietnam War, right? With that came along the hippie movement. Well, at that time, evangelical Christians were like, this isn't quite what we stand for. And they started actually pulling their kids out of the school systems, whether it was legal or not legal at the time. So that was kind of where the movement started. In the 80s, it really picked up, and other people started to understand that, wait a minute, these kids that are homeschooled, they're actually doing well in society. A lot of those myths that were being perpetuated, like your schools won't have, or your kids won't be socialized, right? My kids receive more socialization than kids in high school, elementary school, or middle school. And it's because we have the ability to do a lot of other activities where they meet new people. You're not socialized if you sit next to the same person every day. You become accustomed to that person. It doesn't help you when you meet a new person, right? So, 1980s, homeschool was actually legal in about 50% of the states. It was actually, 26 of the states, but I rounded. And then, in 1993, homeschooling, that was the first time that it became legal in every state. Now, I will warn you that every state is different, and some are drastically different. One of the things that I failed to put in here, and every time I went through this presentation, I was like, I have to add that. HSLDA. If you know nothing else, or you take nothing else away from this presentation, look up or Google HSLDA. They are the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They are to homeschooling as EFF is to digital rights. So they have lawyers on staff. They have lawyers in every state that every time a change comes in law, they will actually look at that. And they will defend you if you're abiding by, if you pay your fee. I think it's like $25 a year. I'm not sure. My wife pays it. I'm not allowed to handle money. So Dave Ramsey helped us. You too can do it, but you just got to take my cards away in order to do it. So cash-based. I have $50 right now. Don't ask me for any money. So HSLDA, look it up. It is a lifesaver. They explain a lot of different things. Questions so far? All right. So the first thing that I outright stole was this, but I did source it. So these are kind of the methodologies behind teaching, and a lot of these are integrated into homeschooling. The beautiful thing about homeschooling is, number one, you don't have to be a trained educator. Some of the better homeschoolers I've met don't have a degree. They definitely don't have an advanced degree. Well, I can't say that. I know of one person. So, but anyway, I'll go over each one of these. So, unit studies, that is what the approach that we take in my house. So what it is you build your curriculum based on a single topic. And then everything that you do supports that topic. So once again, I mentioned my first slide or second slide, we're a Christian. We believe there's a God. We believe there's a Jesus. So everything that we talk about, whether it be science or art or whatever it is, that's always the main theme, right? It may not be the only theme, which it's not, but it will be a recurring theme. The other thing is all-in-one curricula. So this is a lot of times what you can buy from different services. There are homeschooling services out there, and they put together wonderful packets. And you can literally say, I don't want to do the research to figure out the textbooks I want to buy. I'll go with a trusted source, or I'll talk to a friend and see what they use. We started out with a system called Abeka. Abeka's a wonderful system. Then my wife decided she didn't like the math because math's not her strong suit, and she didn't like how they taught the math. So we kept Abeka and then replaced the math with Math-UC. And then now she's to the point where she selects each subject for each child because we've been doing this for a while. She's an educator by trade. She does have a degree. And so that's just how our natural progression went. A lot of people just start off with the all-in-one packages. There's nothing wrong with that. Right? Try it out. Ask your kids how they thought it was. My kids hated the math. My wife hated the math. She thought they liked it. Yes, sir.
One thing we were told too, if you start at the very beginning, you're not going to break your kids because you taught them all in one.
Exactly. Yeah. So what he said, because I want to make sure that makes tape, is if you start with an all-in-one, you're not going to break your kids, right? If they learn something, it's going to be correct. It just may not be their learning style a lot of times. Student-paced learning, this isn't really a methodology. It's kind of a mode. But the theory behind this is they drive their own education, so they will tell you slow down or speed up, right? The next one, I can't see my screen. So online education. There are a lot of schools that are actually accredited by their state Department of Education that offer online schools. There's also a lot more unaccredited organizations, so keep that in mind. In Kentucky, we actually have two. They're both, I think, in Louisville, but they're actually accredited by the state of Kentucky. Let's see. Autonomous learning. This is what I like to refer to as autodidactic. I always get that word wrong. That's why I stop. Autodidactic. This is self-driven learning. So a lot of Montessori started out with this concept, right? You go in, there's like ideas of what you should be doing that day. But if a child goes off to play with a toy, then the educator will integrate whatever that topic is into what that child's doing. So that's pretty cool. Very time intensive. It requires a lot of training. Unschooling, this is basically where there is no plan. Kid wakes up, they go out, they decide, I want to go outside and play, and then you as the educator decide what it is that you're going to try to teach. It's all about teachable moments, right? Your child walks up to the sidewalk, they're about to cross the street, you stop them, you teach them about look both ways, right? It's that kind of thing. And then we have, obviously, community resources. I was never a fan of the library system. I always thought it was just a drain on taxpayers' dollars, right? Now I heavily support the library system in Fayette County because they do a lot of really good programs throughout the day, mostly after school, weekends, and they're wonderful. They have great book clubs that, they will beat the Oprah Winfrey Book Club any day, right? So any questions about these?
I will say one thing.
Yes, Jeff.
With the library system in Nashville, they actually developed tubs of books on the subject learning. So if you call them up and say, hey, we need to teach on insects to a fifth grader,
Ooh.
they will actually compile a tub for you.
Cool.
So use those resources.
Does anybody know if, yes?
I was also going to say for Jefferson County, they actually they publish a schedule that covers 2 months, and they actually have STEM for homeschoolers.
Oh, cool.
And they've got Homeschool Hub, and they've got a lot of resources that homeschoolers can plug into, and that's
Cool.
kind of part of our curriculum. There's
great.
There's Lego leagues, and there's chess, and
Right.
there's all kinds of teams and stuff like that you can put together. And
Nice.
It's all free.
So every time I bring up the fact that I hated public libraries, somebody always tells me one more nugget that just makes them better. So go to your public library, see what they have to offer. You're already paying for it. You might as well do it, right? All right, here's our next stop. So there is a shortage of STEM, that's science, technology, engineering, mathematics, talent for the number of STEM jobs in the workforce. Fact or fiction? This is a huge topic. Every magazine you pick up talks about this. I said undecided or undetermined. And here's the reason. So almost every article, newspaper, magazine, whatever it might be, news station, they get all their information from the same source. Now, I provided what they source. I provided the statement that they get a lot of their reporting from. Now, let's analyze this. There's some 40,000 computer science bachelor degree earners each year, but roughly 4 million job vacancies for computer workers. That is a typical statement from the Department of Labor and the Department of Education. Here's the problem. Let's take a look at what they said. There's 40,000 comp sci bachelor earners every year. How many people in this room have a computer science degree? That's actually more than normal. Okay, there's a lot. Yeah. So 40,000 out of an entire nation is not a lot. How many people in here that don't have comp sci degrees are in IT or a computer-related field? Right? I have a business degree. Right. So whenever you look at the actual numbers, first of all, they don't account for people that don't have degrees at all. How many people don't have a degree in this room? And you work in a computer field. Right? We're not counted. Well, I have a degree, so you're not counted at all. There's no statistic that covers you that I've found. And I've been researching this for almost 12 months now. So I can't find one. The other one is the definition of a computer worker. That's anyone that uses a computer to complete their daily activities. It does not count cashiers. So I thought that was an interesting little thing. So anyone basically that uses a computer daily, say an office worker, not an IT person, not a computer science person, not an engineer, an architect, they are considered a computer worker. What does it matter that we only have 40,000 STEM related, or this is just, computer science degree earners out there a year, whenever we have other people that can do the job? So start to read into some of the statements, the public statements that are being made. Like I said, this statement has been sourced several times in several articles, and it's actually a little disconcerting for me. Yes? Yes, that's actually in their report to Congress. Matter of fact, one of the best videos I've ever seen in my life was Mike Rose testifying before Congress, where he's talking about our skilled labor force, or as he put it, the unskilled labor force. So it's the best, I think it's 7 minutes that you can watch. He directly talks about this, about how it doesn't matter how many people we have that have college degrees if we can't build a building because we don't have skilled laborers to swing a hammer, right? Something my wife brings up all the time is you can make the best product in the world, but if you don't have an artist to sell it or to draw that marketing brochure, you're not going to sell it. So we need our liberal arts majors. Right? That's, I mean, yeah, I know. He's like, we need them. We may not always like them because they think different. They're weird. You know, we're linear in our thought a lot of times, and they're like all over the place. But, okay, so let's talk about STEM. So, time check. Okay, I'm good. So, science, technology, engineering, and math. If you actually go to the Department of Education website, which I have sourced at the end of this, they've actually broken that out. It's, the acronym now is this long. Yes, ma'am.
One of my previous schools before I moved to Dyer, Rocky Branch.
Okay.
They changed it. It was STEAM. They added arts.
Yes.
Like art and music.
So schools, what I'm hearing you say is schools are starting to understand that arts are important, and they're putting STEAM as their acronym. So they're adding arts back into it. Yeah. So that's a plug for Rocky Bridge. All right. Branch, sorry, Rocky Branch. All right. Excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up. STEAM, now you got me saying STEAM. STEM, actually, it's a beautiful thing. STEM actually started in the 1990s. The National Science Foundation formulated the finished product in 1997, and they actually started with the University of Massachusetts. They gave them a large sum of money and said, can you actually take this program and put it into practice? And they said, probably not, but what we can do is teach the teachers that would put this program in practice. So, that was an excellent way to start. They actually, kind of like STEAM, added their own bits to the acronym, and they said it's Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math Teacher Education Collaborative. So they understood, no amount of money could replicate this all over the country without teaching the teachers. Here's another disturbing point that I discovered. This bottom line was actually, I copied and pasted this from the STEM Tech documentation given to them by NSF. Have we seen that before? That's the same exact statement that started this whole modern era of schooling, right? So the purpose of the STEM program is the same purpose as in 1910, whenever the government said, we need to cater our educational system to our industry and corporate America. So it's still not about necessarily thinking across all verticals, if you will. It's still about learning something specific so that you can help corporate America or the industry base. I'm all about free thinking. I wasn't that way until we started homeschooling, and my wife made me understand. Driving forces behind this, here's some statistics. I won't get into all of them because honestly, most of them don't make sense. So 81% of Asian Americans and 71% of Caucasians attended schools that offer the full range of STEM. What does that matter? Right? To say 81% of Asian Americans attended these schools, that doesn't mean that they're taking the classes. It means they attended the schools, right? You can still select what classes you take. It's based on your state that determines what classes are the minimum standards. I only took 2 years of math in high school because that's all Texas required me to take. And I would have taken 0 if they wouldn't have required it, right? I would have probably filled it with PE or something, which I guess is why we have state laws anyway. All right. So, but this is the full range. I was lucky. My high school offered each one of these classes. They actually had an honors program in each one of the classes too. I was in none of them. And then they came out and said other minorities are drastically worse. They did not have any statistics that would support that. There was no number broken down by any other race or origin. It was just Asian American and Caucasian, and then other was the other one. So I think it's important that they go back and do that study, right? I mean, if you're going to use statistics, you have to use statistics for everything so you can compare the numbers. Now, drastically worse, if it's, 82%, according to the government, or I guess that would be the opposite. If it's 80%, it's not drastic, right? We have no perspective with the numbers that they've given us. No doubt that it's bad. I mean, I've been in a lot of inner city schools that offer very few math. Even for state requirements, they don't meet the state minimum sometimes. That's why sometimes states take over schools. It's because they can't meet the minimums. 16% of high school students are competent in math. That's based on annual competency exams. And then internationally, we're ranked 29th in math and 22nd in science, yet we still lead the world in industry and innovation. I don't see that as a problem yet. It may be a problem in the future. I'm not a forward thinker. I don't think 10 years in the future, right? It's not me. So our next break. Logic and or reasoning is formally taught in less than 2% of schools. If it isn't true, it feels true. Yeah, I couldn't find any statistics whatsoever about the teaching of logic or reasoning skills. And once again, logic and reasoning is that it's the bridge between all subjects. It doesn't really matter if you can specialize in one subject. If you can't write your ideas down on a piece of paper or convey them to someone else, it's not a good thing. Okay, psychology, who cares? Psychology isn't a part of STEM, so we're not even going to discuss it. There's no state emphasis on liberal arts in any state. It's usually the number one programs cut from schools are, and this is really sad, they say we have an obesity problem in children, but PE is always the first to go in elementary school. And then arts and art-related programs in high school are usually the first thing to go, starting with band. How many people took band? This blew my mind. So a lot of people took band. Does music have anything to do with mathematics? Absolutely. So I didn't know what those lines are and the little symbols, right? But immediately my wife was like, that's a quarter note. I'm like, where have I heard that before? Quarter. It's an eighth note. 16? I don't know. There's other notes, right? And it's how many times you beat. And whenever she teaches math, or she did whenever our kids were little, she would beat on a desk. 1, 2, 3, 4. Helps in counting. It starts making another synapse in your brain fire to put two things together instead of just saying, it's 4 things, I got to figure it out, right? I take one away, I have 1, 2, 3, right? Started sounding it out. Really did wonders in our kids' math progression. Once again, no emphasis on sales, marketing, any other soft skill. We're people, we're about soft skills, even though a lot of us are IT and don't like to hear that, right? Want to be the person behind the locked door? So now, from this point on, I'm going to start talking about some of the things that we incorporated into our school, the Wilman Way Academy. And I will start with, these are Kentucky state requirements. So if you want to open up a homeschool, according to, or not open a homeschool, but if you want to homeschool your children, according to the state of Kentucky, these are your requirements. Now, I find this absolutely hilarious. Department of Education has a set of requirements. Has anybody been on the governor's webpage for homeschooling? He actually has letters countermanding the requirements. So what he will say is there are things that are weird. It says like you have to be available for inspection of your curriculum and material. It actually says that in the law. You know what the governor says? Whenever they come to your door, hand them this letter that says you require to direct all communications through my lawyer. You don't even need a lawyer. But they will never come back, I guarantee it. And I know that because on HSLDA, on their website, they are the lawyer of record for most of these cases, and they're never contacted. So there's some crazy things that can happen. HSLDA, $25. I recommend it. Anyway, so you have to notify your superintendent in writing within 10 days of the beginning of the school year. You have to establish a homeschool on paper with a school name, Wilman Way Academy. You have to enroll your children. You're actually supposed to have a physical enrollment form that enrolls your children, right? Name, age, social security number, those kind of things. You have to record and maintain scholarship reports. That's grades. You have to assign grades. You have to keep attendance records. You must have 1,062 hours and 170 days of instruction. It's funny, all of my neighbor kids were angry because we had like 500 snow days last year. Nobody went to school. My kids were out by the summer, right? They're like, oh, this isn't fair. Well, homeschool. You have to decide on a curriculum. They don't say how you do that. You just decide on a curriculum. And then you have to teach core instructions in English. I never knew that. Okay, so this is how we went through our curriculum and instruction. We determined we were going to do unit studies, which is multiple subjects to teach one topic. Like I said, we're Christian, so our underlying topic is God. And then everything we do from science to art folds back into that. We almost went with the all-in-one by buying packages. Like I said, our first year we did all-in-one, but then my wife said, I think I can do better, and she did. And then we toyed with the idea of online, but we didn't go with online. We wanted to instruct our kids. If we're going to pull them out of school, we wanted to be the ones that teach them, right? Kind of made logical sense for us until high school. I'll get to that in a second. So here's the modes that we went through. We dabbled with online. We're definitely parent-led. Now that my daughter is in high school, she's a 10th grader, we decided that we wanted her to start preparing for college by interacting with other students more heavily. So she already interacted with students with some of the projects that we did that I'm going to explain, but we wanted a little bit more focused attention. And then dual enrollment. Starting next year, I love Kentucky about this dual enrollment thing. All that's required for your child to go to college is a statement from your guidance counselor, that's me on record, that says your child is responsible enough and has the aptitude to take college classes. And then you can go to community college. That's wonderful. Yes?
You can also, instead of dual enrollment, you can have your kids, like you teach algebra, you can have them take the test at the time.
Yes. So you can send your kids, after you do the instruction, you can have them do CLEP tests so they get college credits for that. They can take AP exams. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities to gain college credit, right? And a CLEP exam that costs $100 will save you several $100s in college fees. So that's what I'm really pushing heavily on my daughter right now. I recommend having a lesson plan. This is the one I started out with. I hope my wife never sees this video because she always makes fun of me because like she does this stuff in her head. She was an educator for years, and I have to write it all down because I can't remember from one day to the next what my goal was, right? But I'll show you what I do now. Now that we've been doing it for 10 years. Yes, sir.
Your example you had on the previous slide, is that something you want to share?
I got this off the internet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is publicly available. I think it's from, yeah, there you go. Lesson plans for teachers at the bottom. And this is just one of their several ones. One of their several. Yeah, one of many. So here's some examples. Pinewood Derby. I'm heavy in Cub Scouts. Love Cub Scouting, right? My son is excited about it. It's one of the few things he gets excited about weekly. So instead of just building a car, and honestly in Cub Scouts most parents build cars, my son built his cars. He still does. But instead of just, giving him some tools and setting him free in the garage whenever he's 7, I walked him through the process. And here was our process. I set my goal. I wanted to introduce him to tools he had never used. He has beat the crud out of nails with a hammer before, but I wanted to teach him about saws and safety. And I wanted to be there with him while we did it together, right? We actually ended up doing it in the living room, which my wife wasn't happy about, but we'll get to that later. And then the ultimate goal was to build a race car. What does done look like? That's something a lot of people struggle with. You don't teach, in my opinion, just to teach. You teach so that you can have a conclusion and point to your child and say, we did these steps, here's the results, now let's go have some fun with it, right? A lot of people feel that they have to teach because their daily plan says they have to teach. That's not the purpose of education. So this is the plan that we went through. Before we even touched the wood, we went out on the internet. We found a lot of really good sources. You would be surprised at the number of physics and engineering people that model Pinewood Derby cars. I mean, this is crazy. We got to wind test the car that he picked with a statistical model from some guy's website in USC or something like that, UCLA. It was great. They had 400 versions of cars, and we did it. We learned about friction. That's very important whenever you have a unpowered, gravity-powered car, is friction, right? How do you reduce drag? We built the car, and then we raced the car. So here's the end result. This is my son holding up his piece of balsa wood. If you ever felt balsa wood, it's really light. That whole block is ounces. We went on the internet. We tested all these different designs. He didn't want to go for speed. He wanted to go what he thought was cool. I was okay with that. It's his car. So we came up with this very aerodynamic car right here, right? The only thing I did on this whole thing was I did the sanding because I love my son. I think he did a great job, but I wasn't going to let him race that car. So I sanded it, right? Yeah, he did all the cutting himself. He did all the design work himself, and he ended up winning 3rd place. Now, in his den, there were only 5 people, but we didn't talk about that, right? So one wheel fell off, so that guy was, he couldn't even repair it. And we're like, oh, sorry, kid. You did a good job, though. Good job, right? So that is what we do with homeschooling. Now, my older daughter, some of you have heard some of this before because she was here doing this presentation last year. Was she here last year? Jeff, was my daughter here last year? Okay, thank you. Okay, she was here last year talking about going to Africa. And this is what we did. So I wanted to teach. She said, Dad, I want to be an artist. I was like, yeah. She goes, I want to be a photographer. I was like, eh. I know nothing about art. That statement, you know art because it's what you appreciate, or you'll know art when you see it. I don't know art, right? Buildings, I go, wow, it's cement. Congratulations, you made it stand up. That's art to me, right? And she wanted to provide access, basically the HFC model here, to children in Kenya to receive the same level of education she's getting. It already helps that my mother-in-law has a mission that she goes over every 6 months to Kenya, and we have adopted a clinic and a school. So she wanted to provide education to this school. What does done look like? We wanted a working Rachel pie. And whenever you go over to the HFC booth, they'll have it all the way over to the left-hand side. It's just a little Raspberry Pi with a wireless dongle plugged into it and software, right? That's all we were looking for the first year. She was 13. She was a computer user. That was it. So my plan, I wanted to teach her about the Raspberry Pi because that was a self-contained computer. Cost $25, I think it is, 35. I don't remember. I haven't bought one in a while. I wanted to build an XBMC server. And the reason for that is, if you know anything about XBMC, it basically is already there. You just have to download it, correctly install it on the SD card, plug it in, and hook it up to a TV. You're done, right? So it was a good baby step. I wanted her to gain an appreciation for Windows, which after I show you one of the pictures here, you will understand that she now has the same cruddy appreciation of Windows the rest of us probably do. I made her do a fresh install on everything, even though the computers were new. Gain an appreciation of Linux, because I don't have an appreciation of Linux. I hate Linux, but I made her do everything command line. She now understands Linux command line. She won't use it, and I don't blame her, and I'm not going to make her. But I wanted her to understand what goes on behind the scenes. How does the software talk to the hardware to make the light blink or whatever? Build and deploy a Rachel Pi, and then this one was hers. She said, I want to talk at one of these conferences you go to. And I said, well, I want to go to ShmooCon, and I've never been able to get a ticket. So maybe if I ride the coattails of my daughter, they'll give us a ticket. So she was selected to go to ShmooCon, and I went up there like a champion. I was on stage with her. Johnny Long came up. It was great. And then she taught at did a topic at Appalachian Institute for Digital Evidence, Circle City Con. She's been to Nashville at B-Sides Nashville. And this has actually led to her. She is now this semester taking a public speaking course. So that's one of the emphasis that she's learned is I want to be a better public speaker. It's good to have all this practice, but if I don't have the foundation, I'm never going to get better. So I was like, woohoo, win for Dad. So this was the first thing she did. On her own, she went out and found this program called Lego CAD. Has anybody heard of Lego CAD? So AutoCAD is a drawing and engineering program, right, to make designs. She found Lego CAD. What you do is import a picture into Lego CAD, and it will tell you what parts you need to build that picture. It is cool. So this is my Raspberry Pi case. She built that herself out of Legos, her and her little brother. So from there, she built the Rachel Pi. So I made her go out and get go out to the development site, pull down the OS, install it, and test it. I was going the cheap route because I'm thinking it's a mission trip. We got to save money here, right? I bought the wrong Wi-Fi dongle. So whenever we plugged it in, it didn't have the drivers already loaded. So I made her go out and get the drivers and load them. She did not appreciate that, but she appreciates Linux. This is her at about hour 8, doing fresh installs on Windows after hitting yes to everything, right? And then I said, hey, really good job. Now we got to secure these devices, because Johnny Long will tell you any computer in Africa will end up with a virus or malware within the first day you turn it on. So we went through using, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, man, I'm a horrible father. So I made her pick out either the CIS standard, the NSA standard, or the DISA standard, and then go through like all 250 pages and secure it. And about day 5, I remembered my horror stories of doing that myself, and I was like, all right, stop. We're going to go to Microsoft and see what they have to say, and then we would use Microsoft, but yeah. So yeah, that's why she had that look on her face, because she hated me at that point. This was kind of the finished product. What you don't see is the other laptops under there. I think we ended up taking 4 laptops on this trip. Once again, she knew she had a lot of problems with Wi-Fi. So her thing was, what can we do if this Wi-Fi thing messes up? Thanks. And so I was like, I don't know, what would you do? And she goes, maybe we need some kind of physical thing. So that's why she got the Cat5 cable. And of course, I bought Cat5 cable on a spool and connectors, and she had to make it. Yeah. So she did go to Africa, and this is her testing it before she turned it over. And she, by the way, it was her and my wife. My wife can barely turn on a computer, so my daughter was completely alone during this whole Africa trip teaching the locals. So this is her teaching some of the locals. This is one of my favorite people, Salome. Wonderful lady. She actually supports an orphanage, a community school, and then the Maasai tribal school that we support. So we taught her so that she could teach them. Here's another project. Well, so she left in 2014. So I had the other 2 kids, right? And I was like, oh, well, mom's not here, so I guess dad's teaching you. What are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about radio waveform propagation, and we're going to get rid of cable. Well, actually, we had satellite TV at the time. I'm tired of paying $180 a month. So this is my daughter and my son. After they had Googled HD antennas, they had selected this box antenna down here. I made them ensure that we already had all the parts. I didn't want to buy anything. So they had to go through all these different websites and all these different models of antennas. And this is the one that they selected. And we tuned our TV. I made them walk around the house to each of the TVs and see where the best placement was. Of course, keeping a nice little list of where they were. And so now we don't have satellite TV anymore. We've completely cut the cord. Last one, Africa 2015. Whenever my daughter came back from Africa, she said, I really love what I did over there. I really want to be an artist. And I said, no, what we need to do is build on what we did. So luckily at ShmooCon, whenever she was giving her presentation, Johnny Long asked if he could have the last 5 minutes. What he did was bring us 2 of his ruggedized pelican pies with the stipulation that she finished them. They were in boxes. So this is my daughter working with Sam Kitsch about 4 o'clock in the morning, soldering, which I really don't recommend for the kids, by the way. They should solder during the day whenever they're fresh. But she learned a lot, right? And then we deployed that. Oh, we talked about it at B-Sides Nashville. Thanks, Jeff. Love you. This is her. So she still wants to be a photographer, but this is her first 2 books, geek books, that she's actually gotten. Georgia Weidman's pen testing book. We've started going through that. And then the other one is Black Hat Python, which she looked at it, laughed, and put it on the shelf. Right? She's like, if you can't do it, I'm not going to try it. And I was like, wrong attitude, but I won't make you. And then whenever we went to Africa, we actually were able to do 2 things. We went to Uganda first, help support Johnny setting up his hackerspace. And these are each of my children teaching robotics and electronics. My 9-year-old is one of the people teaching. He would not have been able to do that had we not homeschooled, right? He would have been sitting in the corner, probably playing on his iPad. But because he had enough skills, those foundational skills and logic, as a 9-year-old, to train. So Johnny said, let him try. We'll see what he can do. He did a really good job. So any questions? What is it? It's one of my favorite people in Africa. Yes, sir. Ah. Yeah. So the question is, if you're homeschooling, how do you deal with special needs issues? Excellent question. Each one of my kids has a special need. So, yes, you have a special need?
No, but
Oh, okay.
I mean, my mom got really confused when I showed her that division we were learning in school, and I went to science. Remember that one?
What are you doing? Common Core? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So what we do is, so my son, whenever we adopted him, he had cleft lip, cleft palate. That resulted in, so he couldn't hear for like the first 3 years of his life. So now he has speaking and reading issues, because in order to read, it helps if you can hear. So we actually rely on the local school system. You cannot be barred from using this. No state allows this. You cannot be barred from using the local school system to address special needs. Because you are a taxpayer, you're guaranteed that right. Now, what they will do is make you fill out every piece of paper that you did not fill out because your kid wasn't in public school. So be prepared for that. Yes?
Your local, like your state will have a conference. And a lot of those conferences have all the special needs curriculum.
Yes. So one of my favorite ones, Great Homeschool Conventions. They have 4 conventions, or maybe 5. The one for this area is in Cincinnati. If you're on the East Coast, they do South Carolina, Dallas area, and somewhere in California. They have experts there. Whenever I come back from one of these conferences and I'm like, yeah, I had dinner with Johnny Long. It was great. And she's like, who? She went to this one in Cincinnati. She's like, I met Mike Smith. Who? She's like, he wrote our textbooks for, history. And I'm like, oh, yay. She's like, no, I got our textbook autographed. And I'm like, oh, now I know how she feels whenever I get home from a conference. So, special needs are an issue, but rely on your state. I'm lucky. I'm a military retiree. So because you guys pay really good taxes, I get really good health care. So what the schools don't pick up, TRICARE will pick up for me. It's great. All right. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So time. I'm getting the old hook. So don't forget, these have been recorded. You can find them on Iron Geek's website, irongeek.com. So if you have any questions, my contact data is there. Feel free to hit me up on the Twitter sphere. Thanks, guys.